everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Dice Talks, a Dice Cultural initiative where we bring all the great interviews with the people from the board gaming world in a casual and fun format that you are already used to. Dice Talks, we always have a guest, as I mentioned, from the world of board games, and to be able to share their passion and in projects that they are doing in the board gaming world. My name is Cesar Mendes. Will be hosting this episode of Dice Talks today, and with me, I have a pleasure to have a very special guest. And basically, you will not be able to see, but we can hear the great Nikki Valens. Nikki, thank you for very much for you to join us and be able to talk with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, fantastic. So for us to start, and before we dive into the cool stuff to talk about more about gaming, we would like to know a little bit more about you, okay? And how did you start on the who is Nikki as a board gamer, okay? And how did you start on this hobby for the people that don't know you?
Yeah. Well, I've been playing tabletop games for a long time. I started with Magic the Gathering and some mini games way back when I was a kid, and started picking up tabletop role-playing games in my preteen years. So I've been playing games for a really long time, and I've just kind of always been interested in the design of games. Even back then, I spent a lot of time designing custom levels for games that I enjoyed, or making my own systems for role-playing games and things like that. So I've just kind of always been interested in game design, and any games that I have played, I've usually taken an interest in how they're put together and how I could make more content for those games, or how I would make games similar to those that I enjoyed.
Okay, great. So, and what was the key moment, or the game that really led you to be starting on this more modern board gaming?
I don't think there was any particular single moment or game. It was really, like I said, just any game that I played, I had a tendency to try to figure out how it was working, and what its mechanics were, and how I would design additional content for those games, or how I would go about making games that were similar to them. So I was always kind of interested in the design aspects of games, a lot more so than playing them even. And that's been true pretty much my entire life. I've always just been analyzing how games are made and trying to make them myself.
Okay, that's that's great. So it is always something that was with you regarding the design, not only playing but already analyzing and designing the games. Fantastic, very good. So let's talk a little bit about your path on game design and continue from there. So you are very well known, obviously, by very big games, and they usually are more on the dark and more heavily thematic games, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you had a big shift, right, to different kind of games, more can talk a little bit more fluffy games and more family oriented, not necessarily less thematic, right? What made you do this big change, right, to completely pinpoint to another direction in terms of gaming? And
Yeah.
how hard was it to do it?
It wasn't that hard. The kind of more cute and colorful games that I've been designing recently are just kind of more of the things that I would make when I'm just given the opportunity to make whatever I want. So the more kind of horror and Lovecraft stuff that I worked on before, there were games that I was assigned to, and I'm gonna do as much as I can with them and make them as good and incredible as I can. But the games that I've really wanted to be making have always been these kind of more cute and colorful and more friendly experiences. So when I became a freelancer, those are the types of games that I kind of pivoted to making, stuff like Quirky Circuits or Artisans of Splendent Vale, where they're just these. It's a very different vibe than the types of games that FFG was making, which isn't to say that I didn't enjoy making those games. Those games are really cool, and I had a lot of fun working on them and learned a lot working on them as well. But yeah, it's just different types of stories that you can tell.
Okay, very very good. And you already mentioned a couple of the newer games, okay? But so would like to know a little bit more about these later games, and let's start with the Quirky Circuits, right? You did the board game Quirky Circuits, but you have now a re-implementation of Quirky Circuits. Can you tell us about those two games, especially the latest one?
Yeah, of course. So Quirky Circuits is a cooperative action programming game. So you're working together with the other players to program the actions that a robot is taking. And you're usually trying to accomplish some very simple tasks. And the challenge in the game comes from a limited communication mechanic. So as players, you're not able to openly discuss the strategy of what's going to be happening or what actions you're playing. You just kind of have to trust each other and play those cards. You do end up playing the cards face down, but the backs of each of those cards give some information about what the action is. Like, does it cause the robot to move? Will it cause the robot to turn? So based on just like where the robot is, what you think needs to get done, and how active the other players are in placing down cards, you can get a really good sense of what other players are working toward as goals, and you can kind of help to facilitate that. And it's has a vibe that's very similar to the Mind, if anyone's familiar with that, where you kind of have to have this unspoken agreement or bond with the other players, where you're kind of figuring out where you're going and what you're doing, and there'll be mistakes along the way, and it'll be a little bit haphazard sometimes, but those are all part of the fun of the game.
Okay, very good. And what difference with this implementation of Penny and Gizmos?
Yeah, so the original Quirky Circuits is like a $40 or $50 box. It's a bit larger. It comes with 4 robots and 24 scenarios, I believe it was. And what we wanted to do was to create a easier entry point for it. So we've created what is Penny and Gizmo's Snow Day is a $20 box. It's just the 2 robots, Penny and Gizmo. But it's much cheaper, much easier to pick up and play. It is available in like Barnes & Noble and wherever else you're going to be able to find this, of course. But it's all new content, so there's no overlap between the content you're getting in Snow Day or the original game. So if you end up picking up one of them and you really like what you're seeing, you can pick up the other one and have just even more scenarios to play through with your friends and family.
Okay, so they are interchangeable, right? So the scenarios from Penny and Gizmo Snow Day, right, can be played by the larger box. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's not an expansion, so either one will work on its own. And if you pick up both of them, you just have even more to play.
Okay, great, nice. That's very good. And it is visually it's very appealing, right? So the it's really appealing. The not even the box, but also all the game is very appealing, very interesting to have for a family game, right? So it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
So and actually even from Quirky Circus, right? You have a new game, right? Completely different approach from quirky circuits, right? And it's much more thematic experience, right? That is Artisans or Splendent, right? As you already mentioned, this is a bigger game, right? So tell us a little bit more. What is the story of the game in terms of mechanisms? You have very different things there. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. Like you said, Artisans is a very big game. So this is a cooperative story game with some sort of adventure tactics type of like combat scenarios with it. But the world that you're playing in is this very lush, colorful, the Splendent Vale is what the world is called, and in it you play as artisans. These are craftspeople. So it's a little bit different take on what you would consider like a classical fantasy. It's a much more friendly, colorful fantasy setting. There's still magic and things, but your characters are craftspeople first and foremost, and friends as well. So it's a very it's a much more wholesome experience than what you'd expect from a lot of fantasy settings. There's less emphasis on combat or violence in it, and more on friendship and camaraderie and teamwork and being able to like create cool things to help each other. But yeah, it's mostly a very story-driven game. There's a lot of reading in it. It actually comes with a unique character book for each of the 4 characters. So when you are playing this game, you choose one of these 4 characters that you play as, and you'll have your own storybook that is unique to you, and you'll get to read it. That'll have extra stuff in it that's based on your character and the choices you can make as a character. But you'll end up reading through these stories together. And these are very big books. These are effectively novels, each one of them. We're talking about like 400-page books that are just packed full of story. So there's lots and lots of good narrative in there. And most of the adventures that you go on, you'll be reading from these books together as a group. You can kind of trade off who's reading at any given moment. You'll have parts where there's unique text for you to read based on which character you're playing. And it might be that you've noticed something that the other characters didn't notice. Maybe there's choices that you can make as the character you've chosen to play that the other characters aren't able to make. Or maybe you just have a different approach to how to overcome the challenges that the team is faced with. So as you're out on these adventures and different things come up, each character might have a different way of dealing with these different things that you are encountering. And it's up to the group to kind of decide what's the best way to approach each challenge or each encounter that they have.
Okay, great. So it's through multiple sessions, obviously, for something that
Yeah.
big. And it is interesting because you do see a lot of these adventures that you go with the as a group, right? So there is no specifics narratives, right, inside of the group, depending on the character that it is that we are talking about. That's really interesting and very different, at least for what I from my knowledge, right? So and in terms of it is there is a beginning and an end, right? So how large, how big are we talking about in terms of gameplay?
Yeah, so it's played out over the course of a campaign, and it is quite large. The average is probably about 50 hours of playtime to play through the entire campaign. And even with that, it's very likely that there'll be many decisions that you didn't make and different things that you didn't see. So there's also a pretty good amount of replayability to being able to pick up the game again some other time, play different characters, make different choices along the way, and get a different story out of this game than the first time you played. One thing I should mention is this is a legacy game, so there are stickers or writing on components or other ways that might permanently change the components of the game, which all helps to make the progression of your characters and the progression of the world more felt by the players. So there is also a recharge pack available. So if you do want to replay this game, you can get the recharge pack. It's much cheaper, and it'll just replace any of the components that were permanently altered so that you can play again.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. That's good to know. That's good to know then. Okay, so and you say that it's a campaign, but it is is it like multiple fixed sessions, or do you have the ability of stopping the game at any time and save it and continue next week or something like that? How does
Yeah,
it work?
it doesn't have scenarios in the same way that you would think of a lot of adventure games having scenarios. It's much more freeform because it's so story-driven, and any given day in the adventure, so like the campaign takes place over the course of multiple weeks within the world. So any given day within this story, it might only take you, 30 to 50 minutes to play through a day because you've decided to stay in the city and just kind of like, do some crafting or hang out with each other for a bit and rest. Or it might be a much longer adventure. Maybe you've gone out and you thought you were exploring some ruins, but you've fallen into a subterranean cavern, and now you have to find your way out of there, which might result in a few hours of gameplay that is before you even get back to the town. A more, a larger adventure for that day. But for the most part, because it's just this story, you can kind of stop at any point. Like you could just put a bookmark in your books at the page that you're on, and you could just put it away and come back to it another time. So it's pretty easy to pick up and put down.
Okay, good. And in terms of so it is really, first of all, it's very interesting that it is a completely different theme, right? Especially for a campaign game,
Mm-hmm.
right? As you mentioned, there is no focus in violence, and it's more on friendship, which is a very different thing, right? You usually see a lot of fantasy themes and all combat driven,
Mm-hmm.
right? In progressions of abilities and for combat, it's completely very interesting view of and thematic, right? In terms of theme. And there is an interesting thing that I've seen that is also you do a lot of crafting, right? You have the crafting abilities that are specific for each character.
Yeah, that's right.
How does it work?
Well, it's actually different for each of the 4 characters that you can play as, based on what their professions are. So we've got in the team, there's a tailor who can make worn items. So you can find different crafting materials as you're adventuring. You can use, cotton and wool and leather to craft different kinds of clothing, jackets or boots or, whatever else that your companions would like to wear. Something that's really interesting about those is there's actually stickers that come with the game that both show the mechanical effects of this gear that you're creating, but also the visual aspects of it. So you'll be able to, if you craft a really nice looking jacket for one of the other characters, they'll actually be able to apply that jacket as a sticker to their character art, so they can kind of customize the way that their characters look over the course of the campaign.
Nice.
Harinia is our alchemist, our apothecary, rather, is the correct term. So she is making potions and elixirs and things. Most of them are kind of buffs or healing effects or other things like that. But there are some other effects in there that can be more like utility-based, or they can get you out of trouble if something's going wrong. So those are pretty nice. That whole system of crafting is very much you can learn recipes, but you're also encouraged to sort of just try out different combinations of ingredients and see what happens. So you'll get some really interesting stories of what it's like to be brewing these different potions, and you'll pretty quickly get a sense of like what different ingredients are likely to do, and you can sort of start to guess what different combinations might end up doing, and as you're looking for new ingredients out in your ventures. We also have Javi, who is an artificer. So Javi is able to create new magical items and tools and weapons if you need them for, the entire team. Many of them are sort of utility effects, but one of the things that's also a little bit unique about how Javi crafts, so aside from crafting, there's also a unique set of skills that each of the characters is able to unlock. For Javi, that skill tree that's available to you and Javi's crafting is actually sort of related to each other. So Javi actually has a prosthetic arm, and the prosthetic that he has is his own design. He's created this arm for himself through artifice. So modifying and upgrading his prosthetics is part of his story, and like how his crafting even like plays into the rest of his whole skill tree. So there's a lot of really interesting things there. You can either be making standalone tools for the rest of the team, or you can even be using your crafting skill to sort of enhance your own personal abilities and things like that. And then our last character is a mason, which in this world is specifically meaning someone who uses runes to empower physical objects. So Soraya is our mason, and she's able to apply these runes to different weapons or tools that you have, or your armor that you might have during the game, and it enhances it in different ways, whether that's making them work a little bit better, or perhaps unlocking new abilities for those different items that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And then each of their individual crafts will also just sort of show up in different places within the story itself. So for instance, if you come to a door and the door is stuck or it's locked or something like that, Soraya might be able to help you figure out how to get through there, whether that's by dismantling the door or unlocking it, or maybe like repairing it so that it can be used again, different things like that. Likewise, the other three characters are able to use their unique crafts within the actual adventures of the stories, like when you're out in the field instead of just when you're at home.
Okay, great, fantastic. So a lot of variety, and the characters are really different, and they look very interesting. I couldn't pick one that is really a favorite, so it looks very different. Yeah. And it brings up for the replayability, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so moving forward, then I would like for you to if you can, obviously we need to ask to know. So Artisans is very interesting game, right? I don't know when is it already out, or it's when it's coming out?
So it kickstarted earlier this year. So it'll be coming out.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly when. It's going to be out, I believe, sometime later in 2022. I should probably have figured that out before we jumped in this interview. Let's see if I can figure it out while we're going along here.
No worries. And yeah, no worries. But we can put the Kickstarter link. Are people still able to join, or do you know if
you might still be able to jump in as a late backer. That might be a possibility. Okay. Let's see. I think it is. I think you can still pre-order it as well. So even if you can't jump in as a late backer, you are able to pre-order it off of Renegade's website directly. So that can make sure that you get a copy.
Okay, then we'll put the link down below, okay, on the description, guys, so that you can see, okay, and do a pre-order or a late pledge is still possible, and also from the Kickstarter you can visually see a lot more about the game, right? That if there is something that is still not clear for you. So moving forward, Nikki. So other than Artisans, what do you have? We need to know what you have planned for the future. If you have already something cooking, or are you obviously you are designing stuff for sure, right? If you are almost a born designer, right? So for sure you're always thinking about stuff. But is there something that you are already okay to share with us, that you will be eventually designing and start producing?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm working on a number of different things. A lot of them are in various stages of development right now, and many of them are very secret as of yet. One of the ones that I'm working on that I can share a little bit about is I'm working on actually a competitive card game that I don't really have I haven't landed on a theme for it just yet, but it's sort of based on cribbage, which is a kind of a classical card game that you play with a normal deck of playing cards. Cribbage is a game that I played a lot as a kid, and it's always really interested me with how it works very different from other card games. You kind of make these different combinations of cards. It's almost like a cross between something like a poker and a rummy, and like it's like got aspects of a few different card games that all kind of mixed together. I always make the joke that cribbage is like if you showed a board game designer a deck of cards and they had never played card games before, what would they make with these cards? And it's kind of like that, where there's like a little bit too much rules and it's kind of complex, but there's also like this deep strategy to it that's really interesting. So cribbage has always been really interesting to me, so I'm kind of making a sort of my love letter to cribbage. Like how do I take these mechanics and how do I create something that feels like me, and kind of does the things that I would want a card game like that to do. But yeah, I don't have a theme for it just yet, but it is kind of my first like big dive into like what if I made a competitive game? What would that look like? Because I've always been making cooperative games.
That's cool. That's cool. That's good to know. Always starting, always trying to do new stuff. That's good. One of the things that I love you will regarding board game design is that you always doing very different stuff and very always trying to have something new, right? Something fresh to bring us, either thematically even mechanically. So that's really nice. So. The last thing that I want to do, okay, in here is to play a little game with you that we usually do with our guests.
Okay.
It's something very simple. So we call it over and under. So basically, we'll tell you something, a word or some phrase, and you basically say in terms of your opinion from the board gaming world if it is overrated in the board gaming world or underrated, okay, and give us a little bit of explanation why do you think so that we can know a little bit more about yourself.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right, great. So so the first one that I'm going to ask is thematic experiences in board games. Do you think it's overrated or underrated by the board gaming community?
That's a tough one. It's a very split. I feel like it's a very split opinion. Like there's some people that are very invested in thematic experiences and like that's what they really live for. And then there's, the other faction that's like maybe they're playing a game that has flavor text and they'll just skip all the flavor text and get straight to the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
I would say within board games as a whole, thematic experiences are probably underrated right now. I feel like we don't see a lot of really immersive thematic experiences in games. Like, we get story and we get flavor text on cards, but like the phrase you used, thematic experience, like an experience is more than just text. It's like an emotional state for the players, right? It's like something a bit more, something that they can feel, that they can really be immersed in. And I don't think we've gotten that much out of very many board games or role-playing games or card games. So I'm going to go with underrated in that I would love to see more of them.
Okay. Okay, that's good. Although we do see for the Euro games, right? We do see them shift a little bit more into having a little bit more flavor, right? In terms of at least have some thematic flavor, right? But yeah, in terms of that thematic experience that touches you, other than just play a game, it was good, but really a story, right, of the game. That's good to see your opinion on it. Okay, great. So the second one, it's the deluxe versions of board games. So deluxifying the board games. So we do see this trend some years ago, right? That not only there is a board game, but that there is a deluxeified version. Okay, you did a little bit the opposite, more or less, with quirky circuits, where you made it a little bit more approachable, right? But regarding the deluxifying of board games, what do you think? It's overrated or it's underrated in terms of board game community?
There's definitely a lot of hype around those types of features or re-releases of games where, you know, they've updated components or like made them really flashy or something like that. I've never been super into that type of stuff myself. My board game collection is actually quite small. I think I only recently got above 30 games in my collection, so I don't have that many actual games. And
Okay.
I guess the only deluxe version of a game that I even have is the tile version of Hanabi, but that's more of even just a feeling thing. Like, the tiles are much more weighty and fun to play with than the cards. So I'm gonna say deluxe editions of games overrated. I don't think you need a lot of that stuff to really get a good game experience. Like, the pieces don't need to be super flashy. They don't need to be like full color printed, meeples or anything else, or like big, huge plastic minis that are hand painted, or all of these things. Like, I don't think you need those really big expenditures in order to make the game fun. That said, I do really like when people hand paint their own minis. I think those people have a lot of really cool stuff that's going on. I would encourage them to keep doing what they're doing.
That's good. That's good. And actually, you touched on the next one, which is miniatures, right? If you think that they are overrated or underrated, right? So you already touched a little bit of.
Okay.
Those.
Okay. When you say miniatures, do you mean specifically plastic minis, or what are you thinking?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, more the plastic miniatures, right? Than the.
Yeah. I'm personally not a huge fan of plastic minis. I think like the cardboard standees that can have art on them, or I actually really like the feeling of meeples. The wood, I think, feels really nice, and it's very satisfying to move around and play with. So you can definitely do a lot of really cool things with minis that you can't do with other mediums. But overall, I would say that plastic minis are overrated within games. I think a lot of times games could get away with those components being something simpler, something a little, nicer. Oftentimes, having whatever those components are being something smaller that can move around the board more easily would be really nice. Plastic minis can very quickly become kind of too big for their spaces for games where there's spaces like that. And I think one
Shelves.
of, yeah, shelf space, the box space. There's a lot of expensive like effects of that. And I think there's two kind of big categories that make me feel like plastic minis are a little overrated or overused even in games. One of them is an environmental standpoint. Creating these plastics is a very cost. It's a big environmental cost to be able to create these things, and then there's all of this plastic around. If you end up getting rid of these games, new versions of games come out or whatever, and you eventually get rid of these games, we have all these plastic minis around that are just kind of linger in landfills and stuff, and they're not gonna decompose or break down like the other components we have. That's much easier to recycle, for instance. But one of the other things is actually an aesthetic nitpick that I have of, usually when you get these plastic minis, they're coming and it's just this like gray bland plastic. It's unpainted, and I just think that doesn't look as nice as wooden meeples or the printed standees, like punchboard standees. And sure, you can get the painted ones, but it's very unlikely that they're coming pre-painted, because that's such a big expense for the publisher to be able to do that. And me personally, I'm not I don't have the time or the patience to be able to hand paint all of my minis. So I'm not going to end up doing that. So I would much rather have some nice art standees or some cool little meeples that I can touch and play with.
Okay, that's good. That's good. That's good. Okay, so one last one. Okay, and actually touches a little bit on the first one, and also on your game from Artisans, right? Which is thematic experiences, but on family games, right? Which is something that we don't see that much, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think?
I'm gonna say this one's even more underrated than just thematic experiences in general. So storytelling and world building and character creation, all of these different creative fields are, I think, a really powerful thing to introduce to children, especially just being able to awaken a child's imagination and show them that creating stories and creating stuff like this is possible. I think that stories like that can really help make kids realize that these creative fields are something that can be really interesting and something they could pursue. So I think it's nice to be able to share those experiences with your friends and your family and your kids, and maybe that inspires them to create something of their own.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, and I think it pinpoints a lot with your game, right? Which is really more family side and more not as dark or as violent game, right? And still have a very good experience, right? Thematically, and also a good story. So it's really
Mm-hmm.
good, and it is really different in that sense for me. So at least that's one of the first things that I noticed on the game that was that, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Okay, you've been listening to Dice Talks, a Dice Cultural initiative that brings you all about board games and the key people that make them. My name is Cesar Mendes, and from all the people in Dice Cultural, a huge thank you to all of you that have been listening and viewing, right? And for all your support. Don't forget to keep this conversation, especially regarding the underrated, overrated. Give us your opinion in the comments down below, and also you can reach out to us in all the social media. We've been in Facebook, in Twitter, in Instagram, and we have a Discord channel. So join, okay, and talk with us. We are all over the place. We want to hear a little bit more about you and what you think. Okay, have you played games from Nikki? Are you interested in the games that are coming? Just let us know. Okay. Also, if you like the conversation, don't forget to give us those three little things, right? Like, subscribe, and click on the bell so that you are notified of more videos that we release on our YouTube channel. But also, you can join us and see what we have more on our website in dicecultural.org, and also you can follow our written articles, for example, in the site Os Meus Jogos, where you can know a little bit more about the board games and all this amazing hobby that we all love. Okay. A huge thank you for Nikki for the amazing stories and all the incredible contributions that you're giving to us to the hobby, right? And continue innovating what you have, and also for being here with us to share all the projects and everything that you have that you have already released and also that you have in plan. Thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on.
Okay, fantastic. So if you don't follow and you don't know how to reach Nikki, we can see the descriptions down below, okay, where you can contact and see a little bit more, not only about Nikki, but also all the games from Quirky Circuits to Artisans. So to know everything about what you want, also the Kickstarter that we mentioned, we'll leave the description down below, okay, and all the links will be there, okay, so that you can continue to discover a little bit more about all of this that we discussed here, okay. Finally, I just want to thank, okay, everyone to be here and continue to give us your opinions, okay, and your suggestions. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. For me, it's everything. Take care and have fun. Thank you, Nikki.
Thanks. See you, everybody.